I just smiled. They were first edition Marvels worth 4.8. In honor of our donors, the MC said, tapping the mic, we're turning the stage over to a very special woman. Read the clause, I said. 3 words, steady as the brass clock over the library's oak-panelled doorway. Chatter broke like a dropped glass. The chandelier hum held its note. I kept my hand on the mic, the other flat on the folder I'd brought, lined in blue leather, like the old binding on my favourite Sunday read. I could see my son's fiancée stiffen near the champagne fountain, the way a cat does when it hears a door key turn and knows it's not welcome anymore. Donna, her mother, half rose, pearls clicking against the stem of her flute. My son, Drew, went pale. He had my late husband's jawline, even when he clenched it. Read the clause, I repeated, and nodded to Tariq, the library director, who had the document copied and sealed like a little paper army behind the podium. He hadn't wanted drama at his spring gala. He got a whole theatre. Folks, he said, tapping papers into alignment, at the donor's request, we're going to read an excerpt from the Deed of Gift and Trust Agreement related to tonight's featured collection. Donna's lips curled. Is this necessary? It is, I said, and looked at my son. This is when everyone in this room learns why I smiled when you threw out my comics. Before I rewind, do me a favor. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and drop a comment with where you're listening from. I'm always curious who's out there at my kitchen table with me. All right, let me take you back to how we got here. 10 months earlier. I'm Nora Kellerman, 68, retired middle school art teacher, widow of one good man who never missed a union meeting and could fix a leaky sink with one hand while turning pages of Fantastic Four with the other. We lived our whole married life in River Glen, Ohio, a suburb that pretends it's quaint even when the highway splits it in two like a wishbone. The house is modest. 1 story, brick, a front yard that got too much clover every summer until I decided I liked the clover. The smell of cut grass and clay, the sound of kids racing their bikes, the ripple of our maple when the wind comes up out of nowhere. That's what my place sounds like. I taught in a red brick school 2 miles from home for 37 years. Paint under my nails for 37 Halloweens. Glue gun burns every spring musical. The joy of seeing a kid who can't sit still suddenly go silent when he realizes his lines make a dragon's wing. When my husband Paul passed, stroke quick as an erased line, I didn't sell the house. I sat on the porch and let summer wash over me. I walked to the library. I went down to the basement and turned on the dehumidifier. It whirred to life like an old friend clearing its throat. Our basement has 3 things that matter: a workbench, a coffee can full of screws, and rows of short white comic boxes my husband called our little time machines. He grew up a paperboy. I grew up in a house where my brothers nicked quarters from couch cushions. Comic books were our contrarian savings account. Not the kind you brag about. The quiet kind, protected with mylar and a prayer. By the time I was 23, we had Amazing Tales issues with covers that looked like stained glass. By the time I was 35, we had a short box of things it made me nervous to touch without washing my hands first. By the time I was 50, we had duplicates because Paul couldn't say no to a good trade. By 68, I had a system. Treasures elsewhere, decoys downstairs, records locked away, and a smile so calm you'd think I'd never been poor. Remember this detail. Drew is my only child. He was the kid who could memorize batting averages, but not his own dentist appointment. Sensitive, stubborn, loyal as a retriever to whoever gave him a scratch behind the ears. He loved comics when he was small, taped posters to his ceiling. drew his own heroes in marker with names like Captain Cornfield and the Night Engineer. But as he got older, his eyes shifted to shinier things. Cars he couldn't afford. Houses he wanted to walk through and smell the granite in as if it were bread. He found a job in real estate, which in our town really means being polite to rich people while telling less rich people where they can't park. He met Sloane at a brokerage luncheon and fell hard. She had glossy hair and the ability to look through someone as if they were a smudge on her sunglasses. Her mother, Donna, runs an HOA like a medieval guild with bylaws as sharp as swords, out in a development called Old Orchard Lakes, where everyone's mailbox looks the same and the ducks are somehow unionized. The first sign was not the snide comment, it was the lemon cake. "Mom?" Drew said, arriving with a bakery box and Sloane on his arm. "We brought dessert." "From DeLuca's," I said. "You needed a bank loan for that." Sloane smiled faintly. "It's a special day. We have news." We sat at my kitchen table, the one with knife nicks from 1983 when I learned you need a cutting board, and I got the good plates because I am not an animal. Sloane did the throwing the first confetti. "We're engaged," she said, left hand floating just enough that I could see the stone catch the autumn light. "We're thinking September, at Shoreline Country Club." I put my hand over hers. "Congratulations. May you always use your words kindly." Donna would later tell people I sounded like a guidance counselor. That's correct. I've been worse things. "Shoreline is beautiful," I said. Sloane sipped her coffee. "It is. Which is why it's the right place. My mother's on the board." Of course she was. Drew leaned forward, elbows on the wood, eyes soft. "Mom, there's another thing," he said. "We're trying to be smart with money and, well, we were in the basement." "The basement?" I said. The dehumidifier hummed downstairs, steady as a metronome. "You have those boxes down there," he said, shrugging in the direction of the floor, like the boxes could hear and be offended. "I was just thinking we could clean it out. You know, fresh start. There's stuff from when Dad worked the night shift and you tried to build bookshelves, the ones that lean, and the comics." Sloane cut in, perfectly neutral. "It's not healthy to keep clutter. We've been reading about it. It can be a sign of grief you haven't processed." "I processed my grief," I said. "I watered it. I made it sit next to me and do a crossword. Let's not pathologize a person who keeps her Christmas ornaments labeled." Sloane's smile didn't move. "It's just the boxes. They could be monetized." Drew shot her a look. "We don't mean to sound grabby." "Good," I said, "because the comics in the basement are sentimental. Remember this word. Slow it down in your head. Sentimental." "I understand," Sloane said, and glanced at my fridge, where I have a magnet that says, "Well-behaved women rarely make history." Her lips pursed. "But Nora, think of your safety. Someone could break in." "The comics are insured," I said. "Mum," Drew said, and his voice softened the way it does when he knows he's about to say something that will either melt me or break me. "We want you at Shoreline. We want you front row. But there's a minimum spend and, I mean, you know how weddings are." "I do," I said. "I also know how retirement is." Silence rolled into the room like fog. We ate lemon cake. It was perfect and tasted like someone else's money. The next week, I found a glossy trifold brochure on my porch. "Unlock your home equity." Paperclipped to a note in Sloane's looping hand. "Just information," it said. "We want to help you live better." I put it under the coffee can, full of screws. 2 months later, Drew texted to say a plumber was coming by to look at the laundry sink. It's leaking, he said. It's fine, I wrote. I've been emptying the bucket and thinking about life. He laughed emoji. I'll meet him there. I was away that day. I didn't tell him where. That'll matter later. When I got back, the front hall smelled like lilacs. That was wrong. My house smells like coffee and dust and a hint of Murphy oil soap. Lilacs smell like someone sprayed a lye. The basement door was closed, but the draft was wrong, like the pressure in a room after you take a picture and the air changes. Subtle, like something just left. My hand was steady. I'm not a panicker. If a kid throws a tantrum in art class, you let them stomp, and then you hand them a pencil. That's all adulthood is, knowing which tool comes after the stomp. I opened the basement door. The stairs creaked in that familiar 1-2, like the wooden house was greeting me. The dehumidifier was gone. The work light was new. The rows were not. The shelves still stood. My short white boxes sat in neat pairs like waiting passengers on a train platform. There were fewer of them. 6 fewer. I took a breath. The cold concrete floor held it for me. I ran a finger along a box lid and came away with dust. They had moved the ones without dust. I went to the back of the basement to the little alcove where Paul had once tried to build a model train set before he realized real men can be defeated by tiny trees. The closet door there is a little warped. It sticks when it's humid. I turned the handle. It opened smooth. The padlock loop was empty. Inside, my decoy short box, one labelled Holiday in black Sharpie, a joke, was gone. The rust on the nail where the lock had hung was fresh. I could smell it over the lilac. I went upstairs. My son sat at my kitchen table with a tuna sandwich and a beer, like it was a normal day. "Where are my comics?" I said, evenly. He set the sandwich down gently. "Mom, where are my comics?" He lifted both hands. "I did you a favor? You've been living in the past. You don't need all that stuff." "My comics are not stuff." He rubbed his face and didn't meet my eyes. "They were taking up space. Space you need for, I don't know, a new hobby, a treadmill. I rented a dumpster and cleared it out. I paid for it myself." "What did you throw out?" "Old newspapers. Those boxes that smelled like mold. I kept a couple that looked actually nice, but the rest..." He shook his head. "Mum, you should be thanking me." "Where are the ones you kept?" "In the trunk," he said. "I figured we'd take them somewhere to see what they're worth. We can, you know, shoreline, life." I looked at the kitchen window. The maple outside was perfectly still, leaves like coins that decided to stick around. I put the kettle on. It ticked like a metronome for my heartbeat. "Drew," I said, not looking at him. "Go get the box in your trunk." He was pleased. He went. He came back with a short white box, scuffed at the corners, set it down like a medal. "These," he said. "The covers look cool." I flipped the lid. On top was a bagged copy of Space Rangers from 1989. Second print. The kind of thing you put in the dollar bin and hope a kid with sticky fingers picks it. Beneath it, more of the same. A little stack of what a flea market would call oldies. I smiled. Not my how polite smile. The real one. The one I learned in placements to calm a parent who believes the school is run by demons. The one that stretches without teeth. "Thank you," I said. He blinked. "You're welcome." "You did a big thing," I said. "We should mark it with something sweet." I sliced a brownie from the pan on the counter. I put it on my grandmother's plate with the forget-me-nots around the edges. I handed it to my son. "Eat this," I said. "We're going to need your blood sugar stabilized." He laughed uneasily. the way you laugh at a reunion when someone tells a joke you don't get. Come on, Mum. You threw out a bunch of boxes, I said, cutting the brownie. You threw out the wrong ones. He stopped laughing. Because the ones you threw out were decoys, I said, and rested my finger on the lid of the box he brought. Remember when Dad labelled that one holiday? That was his sense of humour. The real ones were never in this house, not since 2011 when a plumbing leak taught me a lesson about water and paper. The real ones are insured, inventoried, and climate controlled. And you threw a tantrum in my basement. He swallowed. Have you ever heard of a will, Drew? I said. Because you just volunteered to be an example in a lecture about why people don't get to handle other people's property when they can't handle their own impulses. Sloane came through the front door without knocking. She does that. I brought you flowers, she said, seeing my face and then glancing at the table and the open box. Put them in the sink, I said. We're having a conversation. She set the peonies down. Drew, did you do it? She asked, eyes bright. Did you help your mom clear out? I did, he said, his voice flat. And I did it wrong, apparently. Sloane turned to me. Nora, I know this is hard, but my mother says, your mother should focus on her own basement, I said. Sloane straightened. That's uncalled for. So is entering my house without knocking, I said. And so is telling my son that the harm he does to my boundaries is help. She opened her mouth, closed it, adjusted her sweater. We're just trying to help you live responsibly. Is that what you told him to say? I asked, when you had him drag my boxes to a dumpster? Her eyes flicked to Drew. He looked down. Get out, I said quietly. Nora? Both of you? I said. Get out. We'll talk when you remember who the mother is. I'll call you. Mom? Drew said, rising, guilt rippling across his face like heat above a grill. His voice dropped. I thought... I know what you thought, I said. And I know who told you to think it. Get out. They left in a rush of perfume and apologies, the kind people say when they mean, we'll try again when you're more tired. I went downstairs and counted my boxes like a parishioner counting beads. The ones that mattered had never lived here. My ledger sat in the lockbox in the Emma coat closet, a copy at the bank. What came in, what went out, what stayed, what got upgraded. The comics that would make a collector weep were in a vault 2 miles away, under a code my mind could find even when grief scrambled it. What I didn't know then, that wasn't the end. It was the audition. Can I come by? Drew texted that night. Tomorrow, I wrote. Alone. Of course. He came the next day with his ears tucked and his heart in his sneakers. He sat at my table like a boy who'd stayed out too late and found out the living room light was still on. He put his hands flat on the wood. I'm sorry, he said. I thought, you keep thinking you're rescuing me, I said. From what? I don't know, he said. He rubbed his neck. Sloane's mum keeps saying we should make sure your affairs are in order. She's intense. She keeps saying you raised me to be responsible and I should show it. She is intense, I said. Her intensity isn't immoral. It's a setting. He laughed, surprised. You sound like you do when you talk to teachers who cry at staff meetings. I smiled. You remember those days? He did. He looked at the fridge like it was a map. Mom, about the wedding? We can scale it back. Or not. I don't know. I hate money sometimes. Money is a tool, I said. It doesn't hate you back. It doesn't love you either. He nodded. I should replace your dehumidifier, he said, eager to be useful. I'll get the good kind. Please do, I said, and return my house key. He stiffened, then relaxed. Okay. He placed the key on the table. It clicked, small and serious. We hugged. He smelled like his dad's aftershave, which he found in the bathroom cabinet when he was 15, and decided, with great solemnity, that he would be a man who wore aftershave. He left, and I breathed. A week passed. 2. Then came the next humiliations, dressed in pearls and paper napkins. At our first wedding planning dinner at Shoreline, I wore navy because the invitation said dressy casual, which is meaningless, so navy is safe. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat at a table near the side door because the maitre d' put me there. The side door. The view. A wall sconce and a palm frond. Sloane sat at the head table with her mother, laughing. Donna saw me. Did that little startle she does, like she can't believe humans showed up at her event, and lifted her chin. She didn't wave. When we finally moved into a room with chairs that didn't match anything, Donna stood. "Let's review the budget," she said, flipping open a binder the size of a cake. "We have several line items that could be covered by creative solutions." She looked at me when she said, creative. I've made papier-mâché dragons out of old phone books. She wouldn't recognize creativity if it welded her. Mailbox shut. "Florals," she said. "The photographer, the room minimum, and the security retainer." "Security," I said. "Are you having a concert?" Donna pursed her lips. "Shoreline requires an officer on site for events exceeding 200 guests. And we're inviting the entire Old Orchard board, naturally. It will reflect well on Drew, on both of you." "He can reflect on his own," I said. "Mum," Drew hissed. "It's a lot of people," I said, more gently. "Does the groom get a say?" Donna smiled like a warning. "We're very generous." "It's not generosity if you invoice me for it," I said. Later, when the seating chart sprung up on a foam board like a science fair project, "Mother of the groom" was set near the kitchen doors. "You'll be away from the speakers there," Donna said, "so you can hear yourself think." I could hear myself think just fine for 68 years, thank you. You don't make it through lunch duty and budget cut hearings without learning how to think in noise. "It's fine," I said, and drew a little violet in the corner of the budget handout with a pen I brought, because an artist never arrives unarmed. At Thanksgiving, Sloane and Donna staged an intervention. They didn't call it that, of course. They called it a chance to talk frankly. They invited a therapist, a man with very smooth hands, and a voice I could tell had talked more men into suburbia than they admitted. He said things like boundaries and late life planning and purposeful downsizing. He praised me for showing up. I looked him in the eye and said, "Young man, I taught 8th grade for 37 years. I have been praised enough to know when it's a treat and when it's a muzzle." He blinked. "Nora, I'm only here to help." "Then help them," I said. "Help them realize I am the adult. Help them realize they don't get to stage manage my choices like I'm applying to a committee." Sloane folded her hands. "We love you," she said. "We want to ensure your assets are positioned to support you and your legacy. It would be irresponsible not to examine them." "Examine this," I said, and held up my hand. It shook, not from fear, from the energy of knowing you're about to decide your life. "Drew," I said, "would your father like this?" His mouth opened, closed. "No," he said. Sloane flushed. Donna snapped the binder shut. The therapist backed up like a man who'd wandered into a beehive without the suit. It didn't stop. People who have decided their plan for your life rarely stop when you ask them to. At the HOA meeting, where Donna presided like a queen over a sea of matching sweaters, she raised a matter of community standards that had my address's numbers half covered on the screen from the projector's angle. Some homes, she said, are eclectic. We must protect our values. Our values are reading and honesty, I said from the back. The mic squealed. Just in case anyone forgot. Someone snorted. Someone clapped once, softly. Then, this will sound small, but remember it, they mailed me a certified letter with the subject line, Access. It cited a clause, invented out of thin air, that said adult children should be given keys to parental homes in case of emergency. I brought it to my friend Colleen. I met Colleen Reyes in a protest line in 1989 when our school tried to cut ceramics because the kilns were too expensive to maintain. She showed up with a sign and a lawyer's brain and the patience of a chess player. Now she sits at a little desk above a bakery downtown that sells rye bread like currency and helps seniors set their estates right. Elder coercion, she said, flipping the certified letter with 2 fingers as if it were a bug she was about to examine. Classic wording. How intense are they? Intense enough to throw boxes in a dumpster, I said. She looked up. I told her everything. The lemon cake, the seating chart, the intervention. My son's guilt, which is very heavy and not his to carry alone. Has anything valuable been removed? She asked. No, I said. Not valuable to the market. And the important things? She asked. Elsewhere, I said. Locked up, insured, documented. I learned from the plumbing leak. She nodded. Good. This is what we're going to do. We drafted a revocable trust for the collection. We appointed me trustee, with a successor who isn't my son, because this isn't about punishing him. It's about protecting him from people who'd use him as a crowbar. We created a charitable remainder to fund literacy programs at the River Glen Library, the kind of thing Paul would have loved. We wrote a clause that said if any interested person attempted to coerce, pressure, or unduly influence me to sell or dispose of the collection, they would be disinherited from any bequest under my will relevant to the proceeds of that collection, and be barred from any stewardship role over the gift. And we added a little beast of a paragraph, quiet and sharp, that required the clause be read aloud at any public unveiling of the gift if there was a credible threat of interference. Do you need it read? Colleen asked. I don't know yet, I said, but I want it loaded. We looped in Tariq at the library. He wears tie bars and has the gentlest laugh. He used to be a teen who hid in the stacks until his bus came. Now he runs the place and has to say no to people who think libraries should be quiet museums instead of noisy community centres where people come to be human. He said, Nora, I'm honoured. In a voice so careful, it made me want to hug him and make him a turkey sandwich. This is not just for you, I said. This is for the kid who discovers he can sit still because he gets to enter another world without leaving his chair. I want that kid to have something beautiful behind glass so they know people care about the weird things that saved them. He teared up. We'll do it right, he said. We set the date for May, spring gala, auction of a few pieces, unveiling of the rest. A fundraiser for the literacy endowment with a silent auction of the usual, gift baskets and oil changes, and a not-so-silent auction for a couple of key issues that would cleanly fund the endowment for the next 10 years without my having to touch my house. Meanwhile, life played its little petty symphonies. At Shoreline, I was asked to wear something that blends with champagne so I wouldn't pop in the photos. I wore a proper dress, a shade of green Paul used to call Irish after rain, that made my eyes look like I had slept well. I was sat near the busboy station. I laughed with the busboys. At Old Orchard's open house, Donna cornered me by the raw bar. We're just trying to safeguard Drew's future, she said into her glass, not quite looking at me. He's not good with money. You know this. I'm better with him than you are, I said. I taught him to say no to bullies. He forgot for a minute. He'll remember. She bristled, almost beautiful in her anger, like a storm on a lake. You're old, she said. Act like it. I am acting like it, I said. I'm acting like someone who lived long enough to see that sank cost fallacy is real, and so are takers. At Easter, Sloane accidentally baked me a sugar-free pie because she Googled something about older women and sugar. I ate it and smiled, and later had a cookie in my car to remind myself life can be sweet. Then came the final straw. I went to Columbus for a weekend. A little art conference for retired teachers where we talk about glazes and politics, and the one girl we all taught who went to RISD. I left a light on in the bedroom, the way I always do, so the house feels inhabited to people who take watches. I came home Sunday evening. The house smelled like lilacs again. The padlock loop on the basement door had new scratches, not fresh, but not old enough either. I walked in. The closet in the alcove had been opened. The box inside was back, not quite in the same place. A drawer on the workbench was ajar, the drawer that holds screwdrivers and a spare house key. The spare key was gone. I went back upstairs and looked at the front door. A shiny realtor-style lockbox hung on the knob. I didn't touch it. I texted Drew. Why is there a lockbox on my door? He replied quickly. Sorry, Mum. I had the plumber stop by. They needed access. I'll remove it tomorrow. Remove it now, I wrote. I'm at a showing, he wrote. I'll do it first thing. I took a picture of the lockbox, the brand, the tiny serial number. I put my hand under it and felt the heft. I am not a paranoid person. I am a person who knows how many excuses you can put into a sentence if you want to avoid what you did. I called Colleen. Time to move, she said. What's your gut? I asked. Is it him or the in-laws? Both, she said, but he's the hinge. I don't want to break him, I said. You're not, she said. You're blocking the door so the wind doesn't ruin the rest of the house. We filed a notice downtown with the clerk of courts to formalize the trust, because the act of putting paper on paper still does something in this country, thank God. We set a limited power of attorney for me to appoint Tariq as custodian of the gifted items the moment they were moved into the library, so there would be no purgatory between my hands and the library's. We let a friendly investigator in the Ohio AG's Elder Justice Unit know that an attempted coercion might be unfolding. He was a quiet man named Ellis, with a notebook the size of a Bible and biceps that said he could carry grandmothers out of basements during floods. I'll be there, he said. In the room, but not in the way. If it stays civil, I'll eat a little cheese and clap when you raise money. If it doesn't, I'll introduce myself. Thank you, I said. We installed a video doorbell with eyes like a chameleon. We changed my locks and made the spare keys into flowers and placed them in clay on my kitchen window to laugh at my paranoia. 2 days before the gala, I invited Drew to my house. Alone. He came. He was jittery, leg bouncing under the table like it had a motor. I know about the lockbox, I said. I'm sorry, he said. Donna said, You are 35 years old, I said. Donna is not your guardian. I know, he said, voice breaking into small lines of frustration. We needed the plumber and the sprinkler guy, and I thought it was fine. I thought, we're family. We are, I said. So act like it. Ask. Wait for an answer. Don't let anyone who shares your bed tell you your mother is an obstacle. He rubbed his eyes. I'm not the bad guy here. I didn't say you were, I said. I think you're a man in a current he doesn't realize is swift. Grab onto the bank, Drew. He laughed through his nose. You always think you're so poetic. I think I'm 50% practical and 50% a woman who believes metaphors can save lives, I said. Listen to me. At the gala, there will be a document read. It won't be gentle. It will be the cleanest line I've ever drawn. You need to decide on which side you want to stand. His leg stopped bouncing. He looked at me like I had pulled a rabbit from his childhood. I want to stand on your side, he said. But I love Sloane. You can love her and tell her. No, I said. If she's worth it, she'll be worth it even when Donna's not in the room. What if I lose them? You'll lose me if you don't, I said. He swallowed and nodded. The nod of a man who knows words are not yet actions, but still wants to be good. He left. I didn't know which shadow he'd choose until the lights came up. The day before the gala, this will make some of you laugh in recognition because democracy is petty, we got a letter. Lawyer letterhead on creamy paper that probably smells like cedar. It alleged, in its fancy way, that my mental fitness had possibly declined. It suggested that a family conference had raised concerns about my ability to make high-value decisions. It offered to guide me toward a more mutually beneficial framework for stewardship. In other words, they wanted me to put the comics under the oversight of people who don't distinguish between stewardship and theft. The letter arrived with a second envelope with our family name on it in my mother's handwriting, but that was impossible. My mother's been gone since 1996. I opened it anyway. Inside, an old snapshot of me, 13, on my bed under a poster of a caped hero, smiling like I had just been given permission to be a weirdo and not be punished for it. On the back, my mother had written, "Let them call your joy childish if they want. Someone must keep the door open." I cried quietly, the way happy people cry when there's finally an empty room and no one needs anything from them. I put on my green dress. The gala smelled like butter and paper and a piano that had been played exactly enough to sound friendly. People milled, which is what you do at a gala when you're waiting to see if the shrimp run out. Banners hung from the mezzanine with children's drawings blown up to the size of billboards, the kind of asterisk-shaped suns kids always draw with too many points and a line of birds like flying M's. Tariq greeted me at the door with a grin that said, "We did it. We made something together." He pointed toward the new exhibit space, glass cases winking under spotlights. Inside, a small sampler of what would be unveiled after the speeches. Bright covers that once lived on a drugstore spinner rack, now living like royalty behind glass. The old lady who works the front desk on Tuesdays, Marianne, had on a corsage. I love a corsage. It means someone thinks you're a you. Drew arrived with Sloane on his arm, Donna on the other side. Sloane's dress had sharp shoulders, like a person who wants to be an arrow. Donna wore pearls that could anchor a small boat. Drew wore the suit I bought him for his first big open house, the one he had tailored because he wanted to feel like a man who could go into a room and make it his. He saw me and smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "Nora," Donna said, air-kissing near my head. What a generous gesture. "You always like to gesture," I said. She bristled. "We're here to support Drew. He has his concerns." I looked at my son. "Do you?" I said. "Do you have concerns?" He looked at the floor. "Sloane's mom thinks—" "Stop," I said gently. "Do you have concerns?" No," he said. "I'm proud of you." "You're weak," Donna whispered, low enough she thought others couldn't hear. Ellis heard. He was by the cheeses, looking like a man who has sat on a lot of couches and listened to old ladies tell the truth. Tariq tapped the mic. Friends, he said, welcome. Tonight we celebrate not just books, but the people who keep them. We thank our donors. One in particular asked me to do something unusual. She asked me to read a clause. Donna laughed, brittle. A clause? I stepped forward. Read the clause, I said, and the room shifted like a flock of birds all at once turning in a new direction. The clause was simple. It said what we wrote, that the gift was absolute, that any interference, coercion, pressure, trickery, or removal of property from my home would result in the interfering party being barred from any benefits related to the gift, disinherited from related bequests, barred from stewardship of the endowment, and referred to the appropriate authorities for evaluation under Ohio's elder coercion statutes. It said, in plain English, that my yes was a yes and my no was a no, and anyone who tried to turn either into a maybe would find themselves at the back of a line they thought they owned. As Tariq read, the room did the thing rooms do when they realize the rules are not what they thought. The Whitfields did the thing people do when they recognize a move they didn't account for. Donna stood up. This is a spectacle, she said. No, it's a boundary, I said. You're just not used to seeing one you didn't draw. Sloane's hand tightened on Drew's arm. Say something, she hissed. I think Mom just did, he said. He sounded tired. He sounded like the boy who had drawn the night engineer on my kitchen table with a red crayon when he was 7, and then told me the engineer's greatest power was knowing how to fix stuff without buying new stuff. Remember this. Donna's lawyer, a man who looks like he's never once scraped ice off a windshield, stepped forward. Mrs. Kellerman, we have concerns about undue influence. Ellis handed him a card. And I have concerns about attempted undue influence, he said, happy to talk outside. The lawyer backed up like a Roomba hitting a wall. Then, because I had learned from my years in a classroom that you never bring a single plan to a room if the goal is to hold it, I nodded to Tariq again. The video? I said. On the screen above the stage, the library's AV guy, who once set up a projector with masking tape and a prayer during a storm, hit play. The feed from my doorbell camera filled the screen. There was my porch. There were my hydrangeas. There was my son carrying a box with a grin that looked anxious. There was Sloane, in a baseball cap, scanning the driveway like she was expecting paparazzi. There was Donna, in a white visor, checking her watch. The audio cracked a little. Ohio humidity, then came clear. Just grab the ones that look old, Sloane's voice said. This is stealing, Drew said. It's helping, Donna said. She won't even know. Mom's not stupid, Drew said. She's sentimental, Donna said. It's not the same thing. There it was, the deformation of the heart. Sentimental becomes stupid in the mouths of people who don't know the difference between love and weakness. My students used to call things girly. I taught them that girly is not an insult. It's a category of beauty. Remember this. The video rolled on. Boxes moved. Lockbox clicked. My spare key disappeared. The dumpster door slammed. My roses shook in the wake of the truck. None of them looked around like what they were doing required an audience. That's the most galling thing about arrogance. It doesn't need applause. It needs silence. When the video ended, you could hear the air breathing. Donna began to clap. Slow, mocking. What a performance, she said. Congratulations. You just clapped for yourself, stealing, I said. How do you do in mirrors? The library's donors, people who drink too much iced coffee and keep their receipts and think the library is a lighthouse, did something I will always love them for. They didn't look away. They turned. They became a school of fish moving away from a shark. Not hysterical, just decisive. Sloane dropped Drew's arm. "We're leaving," she said. "No," I said. "We're not finished." And this is where my heart broke and grew back at the same time. Drew didn't move. He looked at me like he was on a cliff, and I was telling him the path down was safe, but he would have to take the first step blind. "Mum," he said. "I didn't mean—" "I know," I said. "I know what you didn't mean. But you did something anyway. Now you get to decide what to do next." "Folks," Tariq said, his voice finding a note that suggested he could conduct something more important than a fundraiser. "Shall we continue?" "Please," I said. The MC blinked like he'd just survived a hurricane. He shuffled his note cards. "Ladies and gentlemen, a generous donor, a brave library, and a clause, apparently." He tried to make a joke. The room chuckled. "Sometimes a joke is a life raft." He gestured with a flourish. "And now, the unveiling of the Kellerman collection." We rolled the glass covers back on 2 cases. There they sat, safe as the day Paul bought them, hands trembling, eyes bright. The early issues, the ones with colours so flat you can imagine the press that made them, heavy as sin, perfect as a hymn. The kids in the room, because there are always kids at a library event, no matter how much we pretend the wine is the point, pressed their faces to the glass. A little girl in a polka dot dress said, "Whoa," in a voice like discovering a comet. Sloane reached for Drew. He stepped back. A donor near the front, a woman who runs the farmer's market and keeps a jar of pens on her table so kids can draw on their bags, raised her hand. "I'd like to make a matching gift," she said. "For every dollar raised tonight, up to 50,000. And that was how the storm lost its eye. The auction started. A couple of safe pieces went up for sale. Bids flew like birds. It was loud and tender in that way rooms can be when what is being bought is not the thing but the story behind it. Then Tariq nodded to me again. "Nora," he said softly. "There's one more thing?" There was. "I have a letter," I said, "from my husband. He wrote it in 2010 when we moved the real collection out of the house. He wanted me to read it when I got brave. I got brave. I read. Laney, it began. Paul always called me that, short for Delaney, a nickname I hated at 12 and loved by 25. The first time I saw you, you were yelling at a librarian because he wouldn't let you take home more than 6 books. I married you because you were never careful with your joy. Keep it that way. If anyone ever tries to make your love for paper small, make them stand in front of a shelf full of spines and say out loud that books don't matter. Watch them choke on their own lie. Give away the comics if you want. Keep them if you want. But don't let anybody make you feel stupid for loving what you love. Those people don't know how to stay. I folded the letter and put it in my heart. I realized, dimly, that I had just told a room full of people my husband wrote me letters that still smell like the drawer where we kept them. I wasn't embarrassed. I am 68. The mandatory part of my life where I pretend to be smaller than my feelings ended when my paycheck did. Tariq nodded to Ellis, who nodded to a couple of uniformed officers near the back. Quiet, nice men who volunteer at the library's Halloween fair. They had been here all along, because the library knows its people. They stepped forward. "Ms. Whitfield," Ellis said to Donna, voice gentle as a hand on a shoulder. "I'd like to have a conversation with you about the video we saw and the certified letters your HOA sent to Ms. Kellerman. We can do that privately if you like." Donna stiffened. "You can talk to my lawyer." "Happy to," he said. "Right after I talk to you." She glanced around, measuring the room. She made her decision. She turned and walked out, Sloane on her heels. Drew stayed. Tariq cleared his throat. "Shall we return to the program?" he said. People clapped, but it wasn't just clapping, it was relief. The rest of the evening passed like endings do, little things inside big things. A song from the high school jazz trio because the drummer's mum works circulation. The smell of coffee when the air got stale. A man whispering to his wife that he wished he hadn't sold his old lunchbox. A woman telling me her husband once waited in line for 3 hours to get a paperback signed by an author who died last winter. We took pictures. I signed nothing, because the point wasn't me. It was the shelf. When the room thinned and the floor took back its breath, Drew found me by the case. He stood with his shoulders round like he'd been carrying bricks. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," I said. "I was trying to be a good fiancé," he said. "I forgot how to be a good son." "You forgot how to be good to yourself," I said. "A good man doesn't let himself be used as a crowbar." He laughed, weak. "I hate that I did that." "Then don't," I said. "Start doing the opposite." "I broke your trust," he said. "You bent it," I said. "Trust is not glass, it's willow." He looked at the glass, at the comics that used to live under our bed when we were so poor that the bed creaked when he breathed hard. He smiled in that shy way he did at 8. "I drew Captain Cornfield with a pitchfork, and you put it on the fridge," he said. "With 2 magnets," I said. "So it wouldn't fall." He reached in his pocket and pulled out something small. He held it flat on his palm like an offering. A key. My spare. "It's yours," he said. "I'm sorry I let anyone make copies of it." I took it. "I'll change the locks anyway," I said, "because practicality is love." We walked to the door. I said goodnight to Tariq and Marianne and the jazz trio who'd packed up their drums. I said goodnight to Ellis, who tipped his head. "Expect a call," he said, "and expect it to mean something." What I didn't know then, I'll tell you now, between us and the air, is how much. The next morning, the paper, not the big city paper, our little one, put me on the front page, bottom half, with a headline that made me sound like a woman who had plotted a heist and cooked dinner at the same time. "Local teacher donates rare comics, cites boundaries," it said. The columnist, she's been writing about bake sales and budget meetings for 20 years, called me a reminder that nostalgia can be rigorous. I laughed. Then my doorbell rang. It was Donna's lawyer, with a face like a melted candle. "We're retracting the letter in light of new information," he said, brisk as a man who just busted his favourite suit. "Additionally, Ms. Whitfield will be resigning from the Old Orchard Board." "Because she was caught on camera stealing," I said. He smiled without teeth. "Because she wants to spend more time with family." "Whose?" I asked. He left. The library's board called and asked me to come by for a photograph in front of the new plaque. The plaque says, "The Kellerman Collection, gifted by a teacher who believes its greatest superpower is reading." Paul would have hated the specificity of being called a teacher. He wasn't. I am. He'd have made a joke about the plaque not calling him hunky. He'd have teased me in the car and then held my hand while we walked into the building like new parents. At home, I turned on the dehumidifier I had replaced, not because I needed it, but because I like the sound. I put the letter back in its drawer. I answered the phone when people called to tell me I was brave. I told them courage isn't a muscle you build in the big moments. It's the habit of saying, "No thank you," 10,000 times when someone asks you to move your line so their life is easier. That way, when the big thing comes, your mouth knows what to say even when your hands shake. And, because the world is consistent if nothing else, The HOA sent me a polite notice asking me to trim my maple. "Come to my house," I wrote back, "and say that to the tree." Then came the larger reckoning. Ellis called. "We've been looking into similar patterns," he said. "Your case opened a door." He told me there were other seniors in Old Orchard and beyond who had received certified letters and friendly lockboxes and surprise interventions. He told me a woman named Jean had been persuaded to donate her late husband's stamp collection to a family trust that turned out to be a pit while she received a thank you plant. He told me a retired machinist named Walt had chosen to sell his garage tools at a garage sale that netted him $340 and his son-in-law a $12,000 haul on eBay. He told me words like pattern and scheme and multi-party coordination. "I need your permission to use your story," he said. "Names redacted if you like." "Use my name," I said. "I taught pubescent boys. I'm not afraid of anyone." The AG's office opened a file with a name long enough to feel important. The paper ran a follow-up. The big city paper called Tariq and wrote a piece that made the library look like a cathedral and me look like a bishop. The TV station came to my porch and put a microphone near my chin. I said, "Stop telling people who don't need your help that you're helping them." The segment aired during the 6 o'clock news. Donna sent me a text. "You made me a villain," it said. "No," I replied. "You made you a villain. I gave you a stage." She blocked me. Peace like a tide. In the quiet that followed, Drew came by every other day, not to beg forgiveness, to sit. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Sometimes we made scrambled eggs and watched reruns of shows where the jokes land even when your heart's a little shredded. Sometimes he brought me forms to read. Real estate is paperwork stacked on paperwork. And I circled things with a red pen and taught him the pleasure of margins. We practiced saying no. He practiced to me, which is how you do it when you've been a yes man for too long. "Hey, can you pick up my dry cleaning because I'm slammed?" he'd say, playing the part of a friend who means well but drains you. "No," I'd say, "but I can show you how to use the app. It will save you 10 minutes and 2 years of stress." "Perfect," he'd say, and we'd both laugh a little at how you can save your life in small increments. Sloane, to her credit, did not come barreling back in with charm and tears. She stayed away. Then she sent a letter, not through a lawyer, in her own hand. It said, "I wanted more than I deserved, and I convinced myself I had earned it. I'm sorry." It was very polished, but there was a stain on the paragraph where she apologized to me for calling me sentimental, like it was a diagnosis. The stain looked like the circle a coffee cup leaves. I believed the stain more than I believed the apology. People don't change because of one bad night. They change because they wake up every day and do something different with their hands. Drew didn't decide anything right away. He respected himself enough to hesitate. Finally, on a Wednesday, he told her no. He did it at a coffee shop, crowded with people whose laptops are their lives, under a photograph of a farm field that looks like the one behind our old house where we used to walk when we didn't need to be anywhere. He told her, "I can't be engaged to someone who doesn't know the difference between help and control." She cried. He cried. They gave back objects. They kept their favorite jokes. They went home. That's adulthood too. Letting go without a bonfire. The Old Orchard HOA sent out a press release about renewed commitment to ethical leadership. Donna's resignation became an opportunity for growth. The board voted to adopt a policy requiring 2 signatures on any letter threatening legal action, one of which had to be a lawyer who is an actual member of the bar, not someone's cousin who owns a suit. Walt, the machinist, got most of his tools back. Jean's stamp collection was gone. But she got something better. She got people who stopped by to drink tea. Don't underestimate tea. The library named a summer reading program after Paul. The Night Engineer Summer, they called it, because I told the story of Drew's childhood hero to Tariq, and he heard the part where a man who doesn't exist taught us what to do. The posters had a little figure in a conductor's cap with a wrench, standing by a bookshelf train. Kids loved him. They wore buttons. They asked me to tell them his origin story, and I made it up as I went, which is a skill teachers develop in the dead air between a principal's e-blast and the first bell. A month after the gala, the market did a thing markets do. Someone sold a book like one of mine for more than anyone thought, and the phone rang. An auction house in New York wanted to curate a sale. They said curate instead of organize, which told me everything I needed about their fees. I told them no. I told them we were very curated right here, that we were using the proceeds in a way that made us feel like we'd made something good. They took it very well for people who lose a lot of money and still sleep in very nice apartments. Ellis called and said the AG's office had opened an investigation into seniors and the lockbox scheme. He said a term that made me wince. Rings. He said he would send an indictment list when it was public. He said my name wouldn't be in it, because I'm not that kind of person in this story, but that I'd feel it in the air the week it landed. He was right. The air felt clean. The kind of morning after a storm when your neighbour says, "Is it me, or does everything smell new?" This all sounds big. It is. But it happened in a kitchen and a library, on porches and on the phone. It happened in a retired teacher's shoes that squeak on linoleum, and in a son's bones when he decides not to go somewhere he's invited because he wants to stay home and mend. Here's what's smaller and matters more. One afternoon in June, I found a tin lunchbox in the attic. It had a dent in the corner and a sticker of a rocket ship peeling off the side. Inside, it was a stack of index cards, flashcards from when Drew had been 8 and not good at multiplication, but brilliant at convincing adults he was more of a reader. On each card, Paul had written a joke on one side and a math fact on the other. If Drew got the math right, he got to hear the joke. I found one at the bottom in Drew's scrawl. It said, 3 wishes. 1. Never move. 2. Never die. 3. Never stop reading. There are wishes you can't grant your child. The first 2 are among them. The third you can. I mailed him the card with a post-it that said, "You still get one." He called me from his car, crying and laughing like a tired person who just found a string to pull that opens a perfect box. "Mom," he said, "you always write like you're giving a speech." "I always talk like I'm writing," I said. "Keeps me from putting words where they don't belong." "Come to dinner," he said. "I made chili." "You made chili?" I said, alarmed. "Okay," he admitted. I bought chili, but I heated it like a pro. We ate chili at his place, which he had cleaned like a person who respects himself, not like a real estate showing. We watched an old movie with the volume slightly too high. He fell asleep in the chair. I tucked a blanket around his knees and looked at his face in light that made him look 12 and 40 at the same time. After the dishes, he pulled out a folder. "I want you to read something," he said, "but not as my mum, as my teacher." "Always," I said. He had written down what he wanted the rest of his year to look like. 1 page for work. No more lockboxes. No more bending rules because someone in a blazer says it's fine. 1 page for family. Weekly dinners. Therapy twice a month. Saturdays off his phone. 1 page for himself. Volunteer at the library's comics club on Wednesdays. Walk 3 times a week. Drink water like it's a miracle. It looked like a child's goal sheet and a grown man's repentance. It was both. "I'm proud of you," I said. He grinned. Is it weird I wrote, "Subscribe to Boundaries" at the top, like a heading? I laughed, loud and real. If you're listening and you made it this far, I told the imaginary camera in my head, because yes, I know you're still with me. Subscribe to Truth and tell me where you're watching from. We're all in different rooms, but we share the same air. The months passed in colours. June green, July hum, August heavy with tomatoes. The maple thrummed meaningfully when the wind gathered. I went to the library every Tuesday. I sat for an hour near the case and watched kids point. The older boys pretended they didn't care. They cared. 2 of them asked me, in voices that cracked a little, if they could hold the comics. I told them no, which is love, and brought out the reprints, which is also love. They handled the reprints like something that could break. Then they got careless halfway through a story, which is the point. Forgetting yourself is holy if you do it for art. One afternoon, a girl in a denim jacket asked me, "Is it dangerous to be sentimental?" It's dangerous to let someone convince you that your heart disqualifies you from your own life, I said. Sentimental is a word scared people use when they want to hold the knife without looking mean. She nodded solemnly and went back to her comic. The AG's charges dropped into the news on a Tuesday, like cards turned over slowly by a dealer with perfect fingernails. They named names. They used long words that mean taking and planning and you knew. People who had smiled at block parties and offered to arrange estate sales found themselves sitting in rooms with men who ask very good questions. I saw Donna in the grocery store the next week by the little cups of ranch. She gave me a look that said everything she couldn't say on the phone anymore. I nodded, polite. She opened her mouth. I raised a hand. No, I said. I'm not a courtroom. You don't get to testify here. She flinched. She reached for the ranch. She put it down. She walked away. Drew heard through a mutual friend that Sloane moved to another city. She sent him a note. It said she'd learned something. It didn't say what. That's fine. We don't have to read every book to know what the author is trying to do. By December, the endowment had funded tutors for kids who don't read at grade level, and a fellowship for a woman who wants to catalogue old zines that teenagers made in the 90s about band crushes and survival. We started a Fix It Friday club, where kids bring in broken things and adults with good hands show them how to mend their own stuff. Drew came every week. He wore a name tag that said Drew, good with tape. He taught a boy to glue the spine of a paperback and clamp it with binder clips overnight. The boy came back Saturday with his book, whole as a healed arm, and said, "It worked." I cried behind the exhibit case like an old woman who cries at competence. Because I am. You want an unexpected ending. You want a twist. You want to know what I did with the $4.8 million thing I never planned to flash like a ring. The truth is, comic book values are a bubble that moves like a jellyfish. On paper, on the day somebody somewhere spent an obscene amount on a single issue, my little time machines added up to a number that makes people stupid. And then the next day, the number melts. That's how markets laugh. I didn't sell the crown jewels. I sold some good soldiers. I locked the rest behind glass and time. The endowment was sized not by what was the most, but by what was enough. But here's the twist that's mine. I quietly bought something. There's an old storefront downtown. It used to be a tailor's, then a vape shop, then a place that sold nothing but hot sauce for 18 months. It has display windows like shoulders and a door that sticks. The landlord, a man who wears a baseball cap like a second scalp, made the rent cheap for the right person because he likes his tenants not to disappear in the night. I bought the building, on paper through the trust, to protect it from the kind of floods money makes. I rented it to the library for $1 a year. with a clauses, that says it must be used for free workshops and community nights and a space where a kid can plug in his laptop without buying anything. We called it the workshop. We hung pegboards. We put up a sign in the window in my own handwriting. Bring something to fix. Leave with a story. On the wall over the register, there isn't a register, hangs a framed copy of The Night Engineer, drawn by Drew in fresh ink with a steady hand. The captain is older now. He's smiling like a man who stopped apologizing for knowing things. On the first Friday night we opened, a storm broke just as the door unlocked. 10 kids and 4 parents and 2 old men with hands like oak walked in, wet and bright. A girl with green hair held up a backpack with a broken zipper. A boy had a stack of crumpled drawings that needed backs. A mom had a chair with one leg. We laid things on the table like offerings. We fixed them, one by one, with glue and clamps, and grace. Halfway through, I felt an arm around my shoulder. Not real. The memory of one. To my left, there was empty space where Paul would be if time were kinder. To my right, my son sanded a leg and whistled off-key. "Mum," he said, "I know you always loved those comics. I used to think they were our inheritance. Now I think, it's this." "It's both," I said. "Paper and people. Stories and the hands that hold them." He smiled. "You're going to make me cry in front of these kids." "They need to see men cry," I said. "Otherwise they'll think they have to carry everything with their teeth." He laughed, soft. In the corner, Ellis, not in his capacity as anything official, but as a man who likes to keep an eye on rooms that might need him, drank coffee and nodded hello. We didn't talk about cases. We talked about baseball and what glue works best for sneakers. I sent him home with cookies because some people are magnets for the heavy bags of others, and they need sugar to keep their backs from breaking. Months later, at the library's winter fundraiser, the one with crockpots and no speeches, I stood by the case again. A boy about 12, hair in his eyes, leaned against the glass like he would listen with his bones. He whispered, not to me, but to the figure behind the glass. I heard one word, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For being old," he said, shy. "I like that you didn't throw it away." I didn't tell him I had, that I had thrown away decoys so big I could have fooled myself. I put my palm on the glass. He put his small one near mine, on the other side. The oil from our hands didn't touch, but the heat did. He smiled. His teeth were crooked and perfect. "Listen," I said, as if we were all sitting at my kitchen table again. "If this story found you, subscribe so you and I can keep doing this, telling the truth without yelling. And tell me where you're watching from, what town, what weather, what library. I like knowing where my people are." In the spring, the maple did that thing it does, green like a promise, soft like a veil. I made lemonade with too much sugar on purpose because I'd earned it. Drew showed up with a dog he was fostering because he needed to prove to himself that he could love something temporary and let it go without turning it into a failure. He mowed the lawn because he likes to see lines on the grass. I sat on the porch and wrote a list of things I used to think were childish. Comic books, patience, asking for help, calling a room ours when it didn't have my name on it. I put a check mark by each one. I underlined ours. The last person I expected walked up my front path one afternoon. She didn't have pearls on. She didn't have an envelope. "I came to apologize," Donna said. She stood at the bottom step, not coming up, which is an apology in its way. Not because anyone told me to, because I lost my daughter. Not physically, in the way where she looks at me like I'm a stranger, and I broke something in myself I didn't know could break. I took and called it love. I looked at her. Her hands were very still, the stillness of effort. I accept your apology, I said. That doesn't mean you get to come in. It means you can go home lighter. She nodded. I'm going to a meeting, she said, surprising me. What kind? I asked, because curiosity and compassion are cousins. Boundaries. Anonymous, she said, half kind of a joke, half not. A therapist told me very gently that control is a substance. I'm withdrawing. Good, I said. Everyone will be shocked by how much fresher the air is. She left. The dog barked once, then returned to sleep. The mail came with a little whir. I think of my husband reading the funnies on Sundays and circling the ones that made him bark a laugh. I think of my son walking around rooms practicing how to say, "No, thank you," and meaning it. I think of the comics behind glass and the kids who press their noses to it and the way they sometimes fog the case because they are alive and the case is not. Once, in the middle of a Fix-It Friday, a kid named Maya asked me, "What's the secret power of the night engineer?" He tells the truth about what's broken, I said. He doesn't throw it out. He doesn't pretend it doesn't hurt. He opens the case. He reads the clause. He fixes what he can and forgives himself for what he can't. Maya nodded, like a person who had been handed a flashlight. This is the part in movies where a narrator says, "And that's how it ended." It didn't. It's still going. The maple keeps growing. The dog got adopted. The workshop's pegboards fill up and empty again. The library's endowment statement arrives, and I understand enough to know we're okay. The comics behind glass sometimes look lonely at night. I touch the case and say hello. On a Tuesday in May, Tariq installed a new little plaque next to the case. It's a reprint of a note kids keep writing in the guest book, over and over in different handwriting. Thank you for not throwing it away. He left a pen on a chain for anyone who wanted to sign. Beside the pen is a jar for spare screws. Not because we need them, because people like to leave something that could hold something else together. I go home and sit at my kitchen table. The light is exactly right for reading. I pull out the letter from Paul and read it again because some words you never tire of. I put it back in the drawer with the napkin rings and the little metal key that doesn't open anything anymore, but makes a nice sound in your hand. If this story resonated, tap subscribe and tell me your city in the comments. I make a map on my fridge with pushpins when you do, and I like to see where you all are watching from. And if you've got your own story about drawing a line and finding out who you are on one side of it, tell me. I'll make tea. You talk. I'll end with this. When my son threw out my old comic books, I just smiled. They were first editions, sure, the kind that make men at auctions talk in code. But that's not why I smiled. I smiled because I had already done the thing that matters more than putting paper in a vault. I had put a clause in my heart and read it out loud. And in the end, that's what saved us. The signed and sealed belief that nothing we love and no one we love is junk. End.